Good morning. Thank you. Very honored to be here with all of you today. And I wanted to talk to you a bit about breaking boundaries and taking responsibility. I'll start with my story. I spent much of my life coloring within the lines. By that I don't always mean that I drove the speed limit and never copied a song from a friend without purchasing it. I mean that I, by my nature, task myself tirelessly with living up to a set of expectations. I grew up in the suburbs and I was never a troubled kid. I think it should have been a sign to my parents when I barely cried as a baby that I'd follow through getting good report cards, not getting in fights, avoiding drugs and other treacherous activities. In fact, I never really broke a bone as a kid until I was, 28, and arguably maybe a 28-year-old kid. But I'll discuss why it took that long later on. My high school, like any other, had some stringent rules. This is not surprising. Managing thousands of kids can be a daunting task. And school authorities even had a rather chubby bouncer to keep us in line. In any case, my peers and I were conditioned to follow authority. You raise your hand when you want attention in class. You take bathroom breaks between classes. You don't curse and you don't chew gum, or you pay the penalty. In addition, though, our students were not allowed to wear hats, and I'm not sure if this rule was born out of concern for students hiding weapons in their hats, or if it was considered a sign of disrespect or perhaps gang affiliation. But we were also banned from wearing cut-off t-shirts, tank tops, carrying pagers, and we were not allowed to leave school premises, even if it was just to go to the nearby 7-Eleven for a snack. And forget about public displays of affection. That was just completely unallowed. Other schools in the area were even more restrictive. Wearing a plain red t-shirt, for example, in some schools could be considered a citable offense because it had the potential for gang affiliation. So none of these rules were overly inconvenient in themselves. If you had a bad hair day and you couldn't wear a hat, it was annoying. But it was never really enough to make it a challenge for me or for many others to go to school authorities or lobby for change. After all, we had lives to worry about, and life as a teenager is already complicated enough. So in my most formative years, I was learning a lot about society. I was interacting with people, prioritizing and managing my workload. In fact, I'd argue that these soft skills that I picked up in school have been just as, if not more, valuable in my life than my formal curriculum. Herein lies a concern of mine. We know that bullying, for example, has some severe effects on young adults and can result in lifelong changes in their mental behavior. We do our best to protect our youth, to shield them from that which may hurt them, and, heaven forbid, pierce their tender teenage sensibilities, resulting in some sort of mental deformity later in life. Have we taken this to extremes, however? Are we, by imposing regular and frivolous authority, both alienating future generations from self-governance, independent thinking, and vision, all critical components of leadership? At face value, the statement sounds outlandish, but consider this. Self-expression is well regarded as a basic human necessity. It's a healthy outlet for our emotions, but it also aids in independent thinking, creating an identity and a vision for our future. What effect, then, does mandating school uniforms have on kids? More importantly, we have an obsession with control that stretches far beyond basic ground rules and authority in the context of appearance at school. School was by far the most restrictive time in my life. I was given a few new frameworks, credits, GPAs, grades, semesters, and all of these were largely productive in broadening my capacity to integrate into a formally organized environment. Okay, I bought that. Surely that would be useful at some point in my life. But it didn't stop there. If you were caught eating gum, your punishment was to scrape gum off of the concrete. Being tardy to class was the medieval age equivalent of working on the Sabbath. It was just not well received. I ask myself now what all these harsh rules and frameworks did to my personal drive, and the result is both logical and frightening. Where there is an overabundance of authority and a rigorously defined cultural norm, either with implicitly nuanced rules or explicitly defined guidelines, participants in that organization lose drive. They lose the motivation to self-govern, to set direction in their lives, and still worse, they lose creativity, they lose leadership, and ultimately happiness in the long term. Their lives become increasingly dependent on the preformed structure. It gets scarier. It's self-perpetuating. And so when these people grow up and are tasked with authority and leadership, something that a fair number of them will be tasked with at some point in their lives, the de facto thinking becomes reactionary. They spout out excessive rules. They create the next generation of these what I call demotivated rule mongers. In a few cases, their life becomes about control. And they assert it on pets, on children, on spouses, junior coworkers, and any other outlet that they can. So, why does this happen? If you have children, are you more likely to raise them as you were raised, or at least attribute key aspects of your childhood to their growth? If you apply this concept, then, of being raised in a bureaucratic society, the results become obvious. And what's important here is that the ramifications of this extend far beyond individual successes and failures. They extend to the furthest examples in our economy. Think of this in terms of modern business. The Silicon Valley tech culture, for example. While most Silicon Valley tech startups fail, there are two reasons why entrepreneur types still gravitate toward them. The first is money. If you joined Apple in the 1980s, or you joined Google in the early 2000s, you're probably doing well for yourself. And even if you have to go through a dozen failures to find a winner, the reward is usually very lucrative. The second is a well-known sentiment, and I find it odd that little introspection has been done on the inner workings of this principle. People in startups are motivated. They find new life, vibrance, and often dedicate themselves voluntarily to working 80-hour weeks. They assert ownership over the company's products, generally work better in their teams, and the result is growth that is both unparalleled and, in many cases, an order of magnitude faster than larger, more well-established companies. Gradually, some of these businesses flourish, and as they do, the rule mongers invade. They establish what seem like obviously beneficial frameworks. before taking a business trip, you should go through a few approval processes. Feel free to dress casual, but please do it on Fridays and never in front of clients. Eventually, you end up with this situation. If you don't trust me to do what's in the company's best interest and what's in the best interest for our clients, and you choose to micromanage me, I will follow your direction, but I will take less ownership of the company's goal and less responsibility when shit hits the fan. So, what's deceptive about this problem is that in a well-established framework, each individual rule or guideline makes perfect sense. This problem can never be looked at piecemeal. And please don't ever discuss this problem with rule mongers or reactionaries, because I guarantee you they will come up with new rules to attempt to fix this. So I submit a solution to this issue in 3 parts. Number 1, be fiercely proactive. Number 2, stress responsibility and leadership and not rules. And number 3, celebrate independent thinking and celebrate vision.